Instinctively, human beings tend to lean over to children and say, "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" And we'll give them a little tap on the elbow or a tap on the shoulder, and we'll tilt our heads to the side. That's because instinctively we know that doing that, tilting our heads to the side and tapping somebody on the arm, sends a very passive message that says, "Don't be afraid of me right now. Everything's going to be okay." And we can use that when we're dealing with, for example, the crybaby. Throughout these lessons, we'll be talking about many different difficult people, and they all have names. There's the crybaby, the sniper, the exploder, the steamroller, the time bomb, the negaholic, the neg-addicted, the gossip, the constant critic. There's a lot of them. And sometimes people, you know the people who, when you talk to them, no matter how delicately you try to deliver the message, they cry, or they get upset, or they take it the wrong way, or they feel bad. Or maybe you're the type of person who has been labeled aggressive. Maybe people tell you that sometimes you're a little intimidating. If that's you and you think, gosh, I don't know why people think I'm so intimidating, try using the tap and tilt more in your communication. Generally, people who are perceived as being more aggressive by nature tend not to exhibit passive signals such as tilting their heads to the side. They tend not to do things such as touching people. That's called haptics. Haptics is when you touch people when you are communicating. How communication and touch goes together is really the study of haptics. And when you combine a visual signal such as tilting your head to the side, which sends a very strong signal, remember that over half the message we send when we're communicating in person is visual. Tilting your head to the side sends a huge message that you're passive, don't be afraid of me right now, everything's going to be okay. And then using haptics as well and touching somebody. You know, there are still 3 safe zones where you can touch most people and you're probably not going to lose a lawsuit. Those 3 safe zones are the top of the shoulder, the back of the arm, and the bottom of the elbow. They're all kind of right there in that area. Of course, you can't do this. You can't go around caressing people at work, unfortunately. But those 3 safe zones, you can still give somebody a tap, a tap, a tap. And with the head tilt, the tap and tilt looks like this. Thanks for stopping in. I'm glad we had this talk. I knew I could count on you. So if you have to deliver a difficult message, or maybe you're not necessarily delivering a difficult message, but you can sense that the person with whom you're communicating is uptight, is not at ease, and you want to make that person more at ease, deliver a simple tap and tilt. Remember, that visual message and that haptic signal that you're sending by doing that speaks louder than any words that could possibly come out of your mouth. So sometime this week, before our next lesson, I'd like you to take the opportunity to use the tap and tilt. Find somebody who looks like they might need a little bit of encouragement. Find somebody who seems like maybe they're on the edge and are about to burst into tears at any moment. Give them that tap and tilt and watch how you will instantly tranquilize that person and they will feel better simply because you took the time to more consciously communicate and send that message. That's the tap and tilt.
The tap and tilt, the tap and tilt, make them feel more comfortable, the tap and tilt.
Now I'd like to talk about something that's more of a visual communication strategy. It's not so much body language, however, it does incorporate body language as well. Sometimes when we want to encourage cooperation, when we want to encourage collaboration, maybe it's at work or maybe it's at home, we want to start by removing barriers.
Remove the barriers, it's good for communication.
So let's talk a little bit about barrier removal. Most of us here watching this, we know that crossing our arms like this sends a signal that we are closed. It closes the lines of communication between us and the person with whom we're communicating. But we tend to do that by nature because it's comfortable. A lot of us, our arms just tend to wander up there when we are not consciously communicating, which is why we are going through these lessons now. When you want to turn it on, so to speak, and more consciously communicate, make sure to remove any physical barriers that stand between you and the person with whom you are communicating, especially if you want to encourage collaboration, cooperation. Now, sometimes you don't want to. You know, for example, let's say that for some strategic reason, I want the person with whom I'm communicating to recognize a difference in position between me and that person. I want them to recognize we are not on the same level. In that case, we put things like desks in front of us and the other person. We might put furniture, we might put our computer, we put different territorial markers, for example. We'll put our notebooks, our coffee cups, we'll put things between us and other people when we want to create a separation, and sometimes we do. When you want to take away that separation, be conscious of not only removing your arms from in front of you, but if it's within a team, remove things such as computers and laptops between people. Remove things such as coffee cups, furniture. Get rid of as much as you possibly can so that literally the air is clear between the people that are communicating, and watch how that facilitates cooperation and collaboration. Because again, over half the message when we communicate is visual. And if visually we do not see obstacles between us and the people with whom we're communicating, that sinks into our brain and sends a signal that there are no obstacles and facilitates communication, collaboration, and cooperation. So the next time this week when you want to open up the lines of communication or encourage cooperation or collaboration, whether it's with you and one other person or in a group, before you start the process, look around and remove any physical barriers that can visually obstruct the lines of communication between people. That is what we call barrier removal.
Remove the barriers. It's good for communication.
Okay, now I'm going to give you some great danger phrases first for home and then for work. And of course, I will give you the power phrases that you will be using to replace the danger phrases you'll be eliminating from your verbal repertoire.
Stop using danger phrases. We're gonna give you the power.
The first danger phrases I'd like to give you are to eliminate from your verbal repertoire at home. And those danger phrases are, you make me, or that makes me. Those phrases, you make me, that makes me, are not only incorrect. Nothing really makes us anything, but those phrases are very disempowering. Let's say that your spouse is lying on the couch instead of helping you with the housework as he or she promised they were going to do. And you walk up and you say, that really makes me mad when you tell me you're going to do something and then you don't. That phrase, you make me, first of all, those are fighting words. That's going to trigger something in the person who's listening to defend themselves and say, oh yeah? I don't make you anything. That's kind of what happens. So first of all, the phrase, you make me, triggers defensiveness in the other person, and you are looking for a fight. Secondly, it's not correct. That person doesn't make you anything. What we mean to say when we tend to say the phrase, you make me, that makes me, it makes me, is the simple phrase, repeat this after me, when you, I feel. So repeat that after me. When you, I feel. Say that again. When you, I feel. One more time, and this is a $1,000 phrase. I'm saving you thousands of dollars in relationship therapy right now if you simply learn to say this phrase. You can skip like 5 family therapy lessons. One more time. When you, I feel. So for example, let's look at the message that sometimes we send to our family or our friends or our loved ones when we say things like, you really make me angry when you do that. And instead replace that with, when you don't do what you say you're going to do, I feel let down because I try to do what I say I'm going to do for you. Or when you lie on the couch and watch me do the housework rather than help me do the housework, I feel disappointed because I love you and try to help you with whatever you need. Those types of messages, when you, I feel, actually get through to the person who's listening because they're not confrontational, they're not aggressive, they're not accusatory, they're simply revealing, hey, when this takes place, here's how I feel about it. And that's the way to deliver a message that gets through to people rather than saying, you make me, or that makes me, or it makes me. So, danger phrase, it makes me, or you make me. Power phrase, when you, I feel. So this week, watch, because we talked about this, it's going to come up. You're going to want to say to somebody, you make me, that makes me, it makes me, and you're going to stop. Because you've already written this now on your danger phrase list and your power phrase list. You should be keeping a danger phrase list and a power phrase list. And you will, instead of saying that danger phrase, which doesn't really get you anywhere, you're going to switch into the response mode and use the power phrase instead. Now let's get on to our second danger phrase that we want to eliminate from our verbal repertoire at home. And that danger phrase is, if you really. For example, if you really loved me, if you really cared about me, if you really wanted to help this family, if you really were concerned about getting a job. The phrase, if you really, again, is confrontational and it's fighting words. We tend to say to the people we love things such as, if you really loved me, you would XYZ. If you really cared about XYZ, you would blah, blah, blah. If we want to get results, if we want people to hear and understand how we're feeling, instead of saying, if you really, the next time replace that with the power phrase that begins with, I realize you. So what I mean is, instead of saying, if you really loved me, you would do what you say you're going to do. Say, I realize you love me, and I wish you would do what you say you're going to do. So we want to replace the if you really and replace it with I realize you. For example, if you really cared about getting a job, you'd get up before noon. Instead of saying that, try the power phrase, I realize getting a job is important to you, and if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. Simple. So I'd like you to repeat that out loud after me. I realize you. Say that. I realize you. Say it again. I realize you. One more time. I realize you. The next time you're about to say, if you really, replace it with, I realize you. For example, you can even use it at work. If you really cared about your job, you'd get here on time. If we replace that with, I realize your job is important to you, and if there's anything I can do to help get you here on time, let me know. That sends a completely different message, right? So remember, we should be keeping a danger phrase and a power phrase list, not just for home, but also for work. And add to your danger phrase lists for personal use. Add to your danger phrase list for work. You should be carrying these lists around in your pocket, have them posted around, and when you hear somebody say something and you think, why would you say that? It gets the opposite result from what I believe you want. Write that down in your danger phrase list. If you're having a conversation with somebody and you say something and later on you think, oh, that was the wrong thing to say. Why did I say that? That did not work for me. Write that on your danger phrase list, because simply thinking, oh, that phrase isn't effective, I'm going to replace it with something more effective, isn't near as powerful as writing it on a list and repeating it out loud as we have done here. Because instead of just, let's say, reading it in a book or hearing it in an audio podcast, you are reading it, writing it, hearing it, and speaking it. And when you read it, write it, hear it, speak it, those four things together rather than just one of them alone, the information sinks into your brain like that. So now I'd like to get into our work danger phrases and power phrases. And our danger phrases for the week are, I need and you should. Those are for work. So I'd like to start off with, I need. At work, many of us tend to say things to others such as, hey, I need that report by the end of the day, or I need you to pay attention during our meetings. And when we use the phrase, I need, at the beginning of a sentence at work, it is totally inappropriate, it disempowers our message, and it makes us appear needy. So instead of using the phrase, I need, at the beginning of your sentence, when you are about to use that phrase, when that's about to come out of your mouth, instead, replace it with the actual subject that you're talking about. You know, if I'm saying to you something such as, I need that report by the end of the day, the real subject of that sentence, what I'm talking about, the thing that's important in that sentence is the report, right? And we have to remember that the beginning of our sentence is where the subject lives. And the power in our sentences tends to live at the beginning, in the subject. So when we misuse the beginning of our sentences, when we misplace words in there, such as I need, we make that the most important part of the sentence. We're telling the people to whom we're speaking that the most important thing to me is my needs and getting them met. So if I were to say to you, I need that report by the end of the day, what am I making most important? Where's the power in that sentence? What's in the power position? I need. Look for the real subject, which is the report, and put that at the beginning of the sentence and watch how the message changes. For example, that report is due in my desk by the end of the day. That report is due by the end of the day. Or instead of saying something such as, I need you to pay attention during our meetings, what is the most important thing there? Your attention. So I might say to you instead, your complete attention would be greatly appreciated during our meetings so that they could be more successful. Or, I need you to really commit to this project. Maybe the most important part of that sentence is the success of this project. And so I might say to you, the success of this project depends completely on your commitment. See what I mean? So figure out what is truly the most important part of the message you're sending and put that at the beginning of the sentence. That's where the power lives, and that's what the person will remember as the most important part of the message you are sending. The other danger phrase now we have for work is, you should. Eliminate that phrase. You should. There's a lot of people who talk about the phrase you should and how it takes away from our messages and how we shouldn't be saying it, but it's pretty simple. At work, it's simply not professional vocabulary. So let's take the phrase you should and replace it with I suggest. For example, you should change that color scheme to primary colors. Replace that with I suggest you change the color scheme to primary colors. Big difference, right? Instead of I think we should change our uniforms to something more modern. Watch how the message changes when I simply say I suggest we change our uniforms to something more modern. Very different. And remember, it's not I'd suggest. You're not saying, well, if I had a good idea, this is what I would suggest. You're simply saying, I suggest. There's a big difference between I'd suggest and I suggest. One implies, if I were confident enough in my idea, this is what it would be. The other implies, I have a solution to your problem and here's what it is. So repeat that after me. I suggest. One more time. I suggest. One more time. I suggest. And those are your danger phrases and power phrases for work. Remember to put them out around your desk, put them in your pocket, put them someplace where it's visible, and also someplace where you can easily add to the danger phrase list and add to the power phrase list. And in minutes a day, you can get completely different results from when you communicate simply by changing a word here and there. Simple.
Stop using danger phrases. We're gonna give you the power.
All right, now let's talk about a couple of difficult people tactics. The first tactic I think we should learn about today is compliment the crazy.
When they're crazy, compliment the crazy.
Sometimes we are dealing with difficult people who are emotionally out of control. And when somebody is emotionally out of control, remember that they are truly crazy. When the emotional side of our brain is triggered, it draws us out of the logical side of our brain, and we literally go insane. For some people, it's as if they're on PCP. So remember, we are truly crazy when we are out of control emotionally. Out of control emotions make sane people crazy. And one way to get people back on track when they are crazy, when they are out of control emotionally, is to compliment them on the characteristic you wish they would exhibit more of. For example, if you're dealing with somebody who's totally emotionally out of control and you wish that they would get it together, instead of telling them, I wish you'd calm down, which is a huge danger phrase, what would you like them to exhibit? Maybe self-control? Then compliment them on their self-control. Now, of course, I don't mean to suggest that you say to an emotionally out of control person, wow, you're really keeping it together, bravo. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, if you have kids, I grew up with my grandmother and she used to constantly compliment me on characteristics that at the time I did not possess. She used to tell me I was organized, dependable, reliable, and I was not. But eventually, because she kept telling me that I was those things, I turned out to be those things for her. We want to live up to people's expectations of us. That's just a basic human characteristic. We want to live up to the person that others see us as. And so if I want you to exhibit more self-control, I'm going to compliment you on your self-control, but I have to do it in a savvy way. For example, what happened to you? Oof, I understand why you're so upset, and I'm surprised you're not even more upset. When you tell somebody, for example, I'm surprised you're not even more upset, the average person is not going to say to you, oh yeah? Well, I can get more upset. That's not what happens. Instead, people tend to behave as if, that's right, recognize, I can keep it together even under these circumstances. So what I want to do is find the characteristic that I want you to exhibit more of, and then find ways to compliment you on that. I might say something such as, wow, I don't know how you can keep it together as well as you are, frankly. Saying things like that gets people to behave as if, that's right. And they start exhibiting the characteristic that you're complimenting them on. So that's a simple, quick, down and dirty tactic to use when dealing with an emotionally charged person. In the next week, you're going to find yourself with an emotionally charged person, especially because we talked about this lesson. So the next time that happens to you, remember, compliment the crazy, compliment the crazy, compliment the crazy. Tell that person that they are exhibiting the characteristics that you'd like them to exhibit in some savvy way, and that characteristic starts to come out. The second dealing with difficult people strategy I'd like to talk about this week is telling people they're right.
Just say you're right. Just say you're right. Just say you're right. It will help you.
You know, there's something in our brain when we are emotionally out of control. We all have been angry, let's say with the telephone company, with the credit card company, with the cable company, with somebody where you think nobody gets it, how outrageous the treatment is that I have received. Nobody gets it how wrong this is. Nobody understands what's happened to me. Nobody has validated me yet, is the bottom line. When we are emotionally charged sometimes, what we're looking for is validation. We want somebody to tell us, you're absolutely right. And so, as a savvy communicator, we have to many times put our ego aside. Remember, I can choose to be right or effective. Giving you what you need to get unstuck does not make me any less powerful. On the contrary, the better you feel when you are around me, the more power we both have. I frequently talk about how I am a selfish communicator, and I am. When I am communicating with somebody, the purpose is to get my needs met, and I do that by meeting your needs first frequently. And so one of the strategies that you can find very useful in a variety of communication situations is using the phrase, you're right. Now, if somebody's emotionally out of control, as we were talking about before, our brain tends to be looking for validation. And that emotional side of the brain, the emotional side, the right-hand side, is right now triggered if we're in that emotional state. To get into that logical side of the brain, which is where most of us want to get when we're trying to solve this person's problem, it's much easier to access that side if you give the right-hand side, where the person is currently residing, what it needs to get unstuck and die down. So beginning a sentence with "you're right" does not sound like, "Oh, you're right, we totally messed up, we are losers." That's not what I'm saying. Or, "You're right, we're wrong." I simply mean to say something such as, "What happened to you? You're right, we need to fix this right away." Or, "You're right, this is a problem." Or, "You're right, we need to get to the bottom of this." Or, "You're right, things like this can be very frustrating." A simple phrase that begins with "you're right" does not necessarily assign culpability. What I'm simply doing is giving you the phrase you need to hear, that you are right, so that you can now listen to what's going to come after that, and we can go ahead and solve your problem. So remember, sometimes that's difficult to do because when we are dealing with difficult people, we're thinking to ourselves, you are so wrong on so many different levels. That is not going to get me where I need to go. And again, I can choose to be right or I can choose to be effective. And in this case, using a simple phrase such as "you're right" helps me and can help you be effective. Before we get into our communication principle of the week, I'd like you to take out your worksheet for this lesson. It's in your lesson materials, and it's the worksheet that says on the top, Personal Compass Step 1. This week, we're going to start creating our personal compass. Our personal compass is what we use in difficult communication situations where there's this sliver in time between event and response. And what that means is there's a moment in time between the event, whatever's going on around us, and the response, how we respond to the situation. There's a moment in time. And sometimes we have the presence of mind to pause during that moment in time and reflect on who we are before we speak. You know, the most common question I get during communication workshops or keynotes or training is, what do I say when, or what do I do when? That's how the questions tend to begin. What do I say when, or what do I do when? Before we even go there, we will find much more success, personally and professionally, and in terms of communication, if instead of the first question being, what do I say when, or what do I do when, we instead ask ourselves, who am I going to be when? You know, for example, when I'm dealing with a difficult person, who am I going to be with that person? When I'm dealing with an emotionally out of control coworker, who am I going to be? When I'm dealing with my children who have had a bad day, who've been bullied at school, who have had something happen to them and they need compassion, who am I going to be with that person? When I'm dealing with my spouse who needs a little tenderness, who am I going to be with that person? Once we decide, instead of what to say or what to do, once we have it very clear in our brains who we are going to be, the words, what to say, when to say it, who to say it to, all of that falls into place much more easily because we have started in the right place, which is, who am I? who am I going to be? How am I going to show up in this communication situation? So to do that, what we're going to do is a very simple 3-step process. There are 3 steps to creating a personal compass. And step number 1 is to come up with some I am statements. So this week, what I would like you to do is keep that worksheet around and come up with some I am statements. And I am statements are going to be statements that you can use, who you are, everywhere. It's not just for work or for home or for church. You know how a lot of us, we know people, if you've ever been to a church, recently I went to church and I went into the basement. There was like a pancake feed or something going on in the basement, and there were people in the church basement who were acting so Christianly to one another. You know, they were so nice, they were so giving, they were so kind and compassionate and seemingly merciful to one another. And then the next day at work, I saw some of the same people. They were anything but Christic with their coworkers. They were anything but kind and merciful and loving at work because they thought, oh, that behavior was only for the church basement, I guess. That's not appropriate here at work. You're different. You don't deserve that behavior. And instead of focusing on who they were really busy focusing on who other people were, and based on that, they were going to decide then how to behave in different communication situations based on people around them. That's the opposite of what we should be doing. What we should be doing is, regardless of who you are, whether you're the cashier at the grocery store, you're a difficult customer, you're my child, you're my spouse, you're a coworker, you're my boss, regardless of who you are, I am a compassionate person, a merciful person, a loving person, a patient person. What are the words that are important to you? Who do you want to be in the most important relationships in your life? For example, if you're married, who do you want to be with your spouse? You know, I am what? I am loving, I'm patient, I'm compassionate. If you're a parent, who do you want to be with your children? If you're a friend, who do you want to be as a friend? You know, I am trustworthy, I am loyal. Think of I am statements that would be important to you, especially when you think of your, what you might consider special relationships. Think about that and write down some I am statements for the week. That's going to be on your worksheet entitled Personal Compass Step 1. And those I am statements are really going to help uncover for you the person that you truly are and want to cultivate more. Which brings us to our principle of the week. It is all about me.
Communication principle of the week.
You know, a lot of people jokingly will say, it's all about me. But the truth of the matter is, it is all about me. You know, I really don't see the world as it is. I see the world as I am. And we all know that. You know, sometimes it's more in the forefront of my mind, sometimes it's more in the back of my mind, but the truth of the matter is, it is all about me. What I say to you has nothing to do with you, and I have to take responsibility for that. Just as what you say to me has nothing to do with me. I do not invest in my communication skills for you. I invest in my communication skills for me. I do not treat you with kindness for you. I treat you with kindness for me, because that's who I am. And I also realize what I give to my brother, I give to myself. I do not say no to you in a respectful, savvy, polished, professional manner for you. I say no to you for me. Everything I say and everything I do is for me. So the next time you have a challenging communication situation, you know, many times when we are, for example, at work, somebody says something nasty to us and it triggers something within us that gets our defenses up, and we want to show that person, oh yeah, well, I can be nastier than you can. In fact, I can win the blue ribbon for the nastiest person in this hallway right now. You know, we tend to think these crazy thoughts like that, right? But if instead we have tools at our disposal, we have the presence of mind, which you'll have if you invest in these types of things, to, during that sliver in time between event and response, that sliver in time between somebody saying something to you and how you respond to it. If you have the tool, which is in this case the personal compass, to stop and reflect on and think to yourself, wait a minute, before I speak, what I'm about to say, is that in line with my personal compass? For example, last night I spent time writing in there, I am kind, I'm compassionate, I am forgiving, I am merciful, and I am loving. What I want to say to you right now is not in line with any of that, and that's because I'm crazy. You know, you said something to me that triggered something in my brain that triggered thousands of years of programming, and right now I'm ready to either fight you or run away real fast. You know, it triggers that in us, we can't help it. But to overcome that, we have I am statements. Because I realize in my moments where I'm sane and sober, like now, that what I say to the difficult people in my life, when they're being difficult, has nothing to do with them. That's about me. That is about my ability to handle these situations, especially because one of the basic communication principles is I am in charge of every relationship in my life. I am. It is all about me. What I say to you, not about you. That's about me. So before I respond to a difficult person, you know, I might have the opportunity to correctly deal with a difficult person 100 times a day. I might have only gotten it right one time yesterday. That happens. I'm a human being. I might only get it right once, maybe twice. But if I have the right tools at my disposal, like a personal compass, and correct I am statements to remind myself before I speak, hey, I am patient, I am professional, I am polished, whatever it may be, I might get it right 3 times rather than just 2 times like I got it right yesterday. Because guaranteed I am going to have the opportunity to choose again. Every time I have chosen incorrectly with a difficult person or any communication situation in the past, no matter what the situation was, if I truly chose incorrectly, guaranteed I will have the opportunity to choose again. That situation is going to keep popping up in front of me until I choose correctly. And having simple I am statements that are in your personal compass will help you choose correctly the next time you deal with a difficult person, the next time before you speak, because instead of focusing on who they are and basing your communication on that, you'll be focusing on who you are and basing your communication on that. Because the truth of the matter is, every word we speak, everything we do, is a testament to who we believe we are. It is all about you.
Communication principle of the week.
So I hope you enjoyed our communication training for the week. Now you have some homework. You have some body language strategies to implement. You have some danger phrases to eliminate, some power phrases to incorporate, a couple of dealing with difficult people strategies that you will have the opportunity to use, and your principle of the week, which is it's all about you. Don't forget to fill in your worksheet, your I am statements, to be ready for next week's lesson, because next week's lesson is going to incorporate part 2 of our personal compass, which will be why am I here? So I'd like to thank everybody for joining me in this lesson, and I will see you next week.